Hello, welcome to the Warframe Collective. Today we're going to settle an argument as old as time in Warframe, and a lot of you guys already know, and if you know, you know, but a lot of new players don't know, so today we're going to take the war and we're going to be putting it up against the Broken War. So a lot of new players seem to think that the war is better than the Broken War, and that's not necessarily true. Now the first thing we're going to do is we're going to start by taking a look at some of the stances for these weapons, and first is Temple Royale for the Warblade. As you can see, this is Temple Royale. It's a pretty popular stance amongst a lot of players that use heavy blades. Next, we're going to take a look at Cleaving Whirlwind for the Warblade, another popular stance that a lot of players use. A lot of players seem to like this spin to win playstyle. I don't know how much they like it since melee has been changed so much, but I remember back in the day a lot of people used to do the spin to win shit. Next, let's check out the base stats for the war. As you can see, the war has a 0.917 attack speed with a 26% crit chance with a 2.6 times crit multiplier with a 26% status chance. It deals 192 impact with 92 puncture and 112 slash with a total base damage of 400, but most of that damage is going to be dealt in impact, so keep that in mind. Next, we're going to go ahead and look at the base stats for the Broken War. And as you can see, the Broken War has a 1 attack speed and a 35% crit chance with a 2.2 times crit multiplier and a 20% status chance. It deals 29 impact with 29 puncture, but most of his damage is dealt in slash with 239 slash for a total base damage of almost 300. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to test out the war with no mods on it against some level 75 heavy gunners. And as you can see, the war actually doesn't do a bad job unmodded against these level 75. But keep in mind, Excalibur does have a passive ability where you attack 10% faster and you deal 10% more damage with swords. But at the end of the day, it's not like that's having a dramatic difference on what we're doing here. Next, let's go ahead and put a build on it. This is going to be your pretty basic build, nothing special here. And we are going to run Temple Royale for this. So, one thing you'll notice is against the level 75 enemies, the war doesn't do too bad. It does get through these guys. It doesn't chew through these guys as effectively as I would like it to, but it absolutely does kill these guys. But keep in mind, these are only level 75 enemies, you know? So it's not like you're running up against even swordy enemies, because even swordy enemies are going to have more armor than these fuckers. But moving on to the Eximus units, as you can see, even against the level 75 Eximus, it does pretty good, you know? It does pretty okay. The only thing that kind of annoys me is the fact that it's primarily impact based means it doesn't just shred through enemies like a slash based weapon does. And so as a result of that, it does a lot of knockdowns and a lot of knockbacks, which can be a little annoying. So, where the weapon falls off a little bit is when you raise the enemy level. As you can see, these guys are level 165 now. And this thing is still killing them, you know? But like once you deal with these guys and you get to the Eximus enemies, that's where you're really going to have a problem. And keep in mind, this is a controlled setting, right? If you're in live combat and enemies are shooting at you, you're going to get absolutely melted trying to chew through some enemies with a fucking war blade. But, I mean, you can do it, you know, you can make this work, but there's so many better options out there, including the Broken War. But yeah, we're going to go ahead and move on to these Eximus units. And as you can see, my combo counter is completely full right now. We have our combo counter completely maxed out, and we're still having quite a bit of trouble getting through these enemies. So much so to the point where the knockback is actually effective right now, because now with a knockback, I can just, you know, stab them while they're on the ground for massive critical damage. But keep in mind, if you're in an actual mission, you're not gonna be fucking knocking enemies down trying to stab a motherfucker while he's on the floor. Like, if anything, you want your melee weapon to just chew through enemies. So this is not necessarily ideal. Now, we do have one independent variable for this weapon, as we do have a Riven Mod. Unfortunately, the Riven Mod is not that great. It just gives us plus 8-second combo duration, as well as plus 80% critical damage and plus 129 finisher damage, which is not necessarily ideal, but it does ramp up the damage a little bit. Now, as you can see, even with a Riven Mod, it doesn't move the needle too much. Like, once you get over level 100, there's so many better options in terms of melee weapons, especially in terms of slash-based melee weapons. Like, the fact that this weapon is impact-based will always limit this weapon's viability compared to a slash-based melee weapon. But if you're a fan of the war aesthetic, like you just like the way this thing looks, you can absolutely make it work. And we do have some damage changes coming up, so I don't know how that's going to affect the war, but I don't think it's going to make too much of a difference. Anyway, now this is the Broken War, and the Broken War actually has several stances that players are probably going to use. So the first stance we're going to start with is Iron Phoenix, as it's the most common stance, and it's the one that people are most likely to have. And as you can see, this is Iron Phoenix. It's not that great. It's really basic. But if you're a new player, you most likely will have the Iron Phoenix stance. Next, moving on, is a stance that's been around since back in the day. This is Vengeful Revenant, right? Vengeful Revenant is another stance that's pretty nasty for single-bladed weapons. Unfortunately for me, I just don't have that much experience with Vengeful Revenant, so I never really used it, but this is Vengeful Revenant. It's a favorite amongst a lot of OG players. Next up is a stance that I have never actually used. This is Swooping Falcon. Now, this stance might suck, or it might be extremely nasty. I don't know, because I've never used this stance, but it does look pretty cool, at least half of it. But yeah, this is what Swooping Falcon does. Anyway, next up is my favorite stance, which is going to be Crimson Dervish. Crimson Dervish is another favorite stance of a lot of OG players. A lot of players have been using Crimson Dervish for so long. I'd say out of all the sword stances, I probably have the most experience using Crimson Dervish. Crimson Dervish is extremely nasty, and I would highly recommend it. It might take a little getting used to because it might feel a little awkward, but I would highly recommend Crimson Dervish. Now, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to test out the Broken War without any mods on it. And as you can see, where the War Blade kind of fucked this guy up with no mods on it, the Broken War has a extremely hard time killing a level 75 enemy with no mods on it. So much so to the point where I think I just end up mercying this guy, because the Broken War unmodded was fucking struggling, so I just end up woo-wopping this guy so we can move on. But listen, stay with me here, because next we're gonna put a build on this thing, right? Nothing special. This is a pretty basic build, and we're gonna see what this does against these enemies. So once again, we're gonna start off with level 75 heavy gunners and bombards, and as you can see, The Broken War just absolutely shreds these guys. Ramped up the combo counter super quick and just absolutely ate through these guys like it was nobody's business. Now moving on to these Eximus, once again, the Broken War just absolutely shreds these dudes like it's nobody's business. And people use this to create the War Blade. That's insane, to get rid of your Broken War to create the war. Look at that. That's nasty, with way less of a forma investment. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to test this against some level 165 bombards and heavy gunners. And as you can see, the damage still ramps up extremely quick and it still shreds these guys. Although once you get into level 165, it's not nearly as quick as shredding level 75s, obviously. But as you can see, it still got the job done. Where it struggles a little bit is against these Eximus enemies, because remember last time we kind of shredded these guys really quick, but now even with a maxed out combo counter, it takes a little bit longer to shred these guys, but it still absolutely does the job, and it was still more effective than the War Blade was. So, what can you do to ramp this damage up? Well, obviously, you're gonna put a Riven on this thing, right? And the thing about a Riven for the Broken War is you can get a Riven for the Broken War extremely cheap. So the thing about Broken War Rivens are not that rare and they're fairly cheap. You can get a Broken War Riven for extremely cheap. So you best go pick one up real quick before they release the Broken War Incarnate or some shit. Now, if you're paying attention, that Riven, it gave us plus 65 attack speed and plus 192 crit chance, right? That's going to ramp up our damage real nice. And as you can see, we are already red critting on these motherfuckers. And once again, the Broken War just shreds these guys like it's no tomorrow. And now we're going to move on to these Eximus units. And once again, it's the Broken War for the win. It absolutely shreds these guys. The Broken War is extremely nasty, especially when you build it right. And I'm pretty sure I could even build this thing better than I already have. But considering the fact that we have damage changes on the way, I don't want to do any major build alterations yet. Now, moving on. I know there's going to be at least one person like, oh, why didn't you do it with Vengeful Revenant? Once again, I don't have that much experience with Vengeful Revenant, but we're going to go ahead and try it out anyway. Now, even with Vengeful Revenant, the Broken War absolutely shreds these guys, but it's nowhere near as effective. I'm not going to say nowhere near as effective. It's still extremely fucking effective. But I feel like Crimson Dervish was way more effective, but it could just be a matter that I'm not using the stance properly, you know? It could just be me, like my inexperience with the stance that's fucking everything up. But I just feel like Crimson Dervish is just a much better stance, but I know there's probably gonna be some fucking Warframe veteran out there that has more than 2,500 hours that's gonna disagree with me, but fucking me personally, I have way more experience with Crimson Dervish and I happen to like that stance a lot more. Now, having said that, Vengeful Revenant is still pretty fucking nasty and it's still absolutely viable. Now, I bet you're wondering if you can take this bad boy to the still path, aren't you? Now, if you're wondering if you could take the Broken War to the still path, you absolutely can. But the question you should be asking yourself is, should you? And you know what? Why the fuck wouldn't you, right? I would say you damn well should take the Broken War with you to still path. You should probably take a different Warframe besides Excalibur. I would highly recommend Ash. Broken War Ash is fucking nasty. Our Broken War Loki, any melee Warframe that can, you know, go invisible and just negate damage, like, is gonna do well with the Broken War. Having said that, Broken War is extremely nasty and it is still path viable, so go ahead and enjoy the gameplay, and thank you guys for watching.
Get ready for a capsule.
You have strayed too far from the path. May this correct you.
I delivered a life support capsule to the area. Activating it will buy you more time. Life support on the way. Another life support capsule is now available.
Anyway, guys, that's going to do it for today. Likes, comments, subs are all appreciated. With that said, have a beautiful day. Peace.